lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Heather, and this is The Happenings with HAP. So I wanted to do a video on this topic, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a full-out review, a full-out opinion, and I figured I wanted to kind of combine the two slightly. I'm going to start like a kind of new series for it that I'm going to be calling Hot Takes, where for a movie or television show I have a very hot take on that's probably not going to be very popular, and I'm sure it's going to be bringing people that don't agree with me to this video. But as with all media, it's opinion based, it's subjective. This is just my opinions, so I figured that I could start with the most controversial hot take that I'm going to do, and that is Zack Snyder's Justice League cut that was just released on HBO Max last week, and my feelings about it and about the DCU as a whole, especially in comparison to the MCU. Yeah, let's just get into this video. So I want to preface this by saying that I am a huge fan of the MCU, or Marvel Cinematic Universe if you don't know the acronym. And while I do love Marvel films, I will say that, and I've said this in a past video, my favorite superhero is actually Batman, and one of my favorite iterations of Batman is the animated series. And I've always felt that DC's animated cinematic universe is their strongest arm of their production companies next to their comics. So I've always found that their animated series and movies have always been amazing and continue to be amazing. And that is something that Marvel has not been able to copy. While this may to some feel like I'm bashing DC, I'm not. I am a fan of both for different reasons, and I've actually been a fan of Batman longer than all of them. So I really don't have too much of a stake in this, but it's just what I see as a fan of superhero movies and just what I'm seeing with the DC Cinematic Universe versus the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the Snyder Cut. Having watched the original Joss Whedon Justice League, this was loads better, but it was also very long. This is why directors have editors. This is why production companies do get involved in length of film. I'm all about a long film if it makes sense. 4 hours for this did not make sense, and I know they tried to frame it as like a mini series based on like the chapters that were involved, but it still felt 4 hours. And it didn't need to feel 4 hours. Positives. I adored Cyborg. I thought that Ray Fisher did a great job, and I really loved his backstory and getting to learn who he was. I've also been a huge fan of Ezra Miller for a while now, and I love what they did with the Flash with this, and that he was literally the sole source of any type of humor in this film. I enjoyed some of the fight scenes, especially the fight scenes with Wonder Woman. I liked that we got some sense of a storyline involved as well. So that's kind of where the big praise ends. First off, Zack Snyder needs to have the slow-mo button taken away from him. He's clearly been obsessed with this feature since The Matrix came out in 1999 and has utilized it from 300 on. And while it was cool in 300 in 2006, in 2021 to have it in literally every single scene is overkill. Having it for the Flash because he runs faster than light? Sure, perfectly, makes sense. Having it for Wonder Woman and Superman, who move faster than a bullet, makes sense. I can understand the use of it in those instances, but to have it in literally every single fight scene and even having Lois Lane walking around with it was too much. Zack Snyder, please stop that. Like, it's only gotten worse with every subsequent movie he's done, and I know he loves it. This is a 20-year-old effect that just doesn't have the same impact it used to.
I also want to say that something with the whole slow-mo obsession that Zack Snyder has is it gives the same emotional weight every time it is used, which means it keeps diminishing that emotional weight. So you have all of these scenes of this super slow-mo, and we're supposed to have this big emotional connection to it, and yet I can't have the same emotional weight with that if I'm also supposed to have it in fight scenes, if I'm supposed to have it with Lois and her depression over Clark. It doesn't make sense, and that's another big reason line of why his overuse of slow-mo really hurts the film aside from just an aesthetic reason.
And that brings me to my biggest issue, which is emotional impact. As I said, I'm a huge fan of the MCU. The biggest reason I'm a huge fan of the MCU is because I'm a fan of their characters. Marvel does amazing casting, and Marvel also takes the time to get the audiences on these characters' side. They take the time to introduce these characters, and that's why you had a decade plus of origin movies and sequels in order to build up to Infinity War and Endgame. So when those emotional hits happened, and we've all seen the Endgame reaction videos from opening night, and I was at one of the opening weekends for that film, and I can assure you that the audience had the same reaction as those videos. That can't happen without that groundwork being laid. That is basically the whole problem with the DCU and Zack Snyder running it. They first started it with Man of Steel in 2013, and that was after already a good, 5 years of Marvel going on and doing their thing, and them seeing how successful Marvel was at this, and DC trying to get on that bandwagon. And I don't blame them. I mean, you came off of a really high point and then slightly lower point with Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, and we've had so many iterations of Batman at that point that having a Superman movie was great. The Superman we got, while I adore Henry Cavill and I feel like he's doing a great job, Zack Snyder's Superman is kind of really not your typical Superman, and Zack Snyder's obsessed with making things dark and gritty. I feel like for dark and gritty's sake. That's his whole thing with this DCU, is everything is dark and gritty to kind of be the foil to Marvel's brighter, comedic, happier thing. But not all the characters in the DC universe are that way. I enjoyed Man of Steel. It was fine. I didn't feel that was a good representation of Superman, not by Henry Cavill's fault, but more the way he was written. But I was okay with it. And then we had Batman vs. Superman. The second film in the DCU has Superman die. We're 2 movies in, and you have literally your main guy die. Only a year later than to have Justice League bring him back and defeat a big bad that is trying to ruin the world. So we go from introduction to that in the span of 4 years and only 3 movies. And especially in the Snyder Cut, the relationship between Lois and Clark is a big reason that he's able to remember who he is after he comes back. Yet, except for a few scenes in Batman vs. Superman, we don't really see their relationship develop all that much. By all accounts, they were probably together a few weeks in the actual timeline of the way these movies are. I could be wrong on that. I could be exaggerating. But it's definitely not like years-long romance that is so strong that just seeing her literally changes him. And of course, poor Amy Adams is literally given nothing to do. Poor Diane Lane is also given nothing to do in this series. And so when Superman dies and then Superman comes back, that emotional impact can't be there because we weren't given the time with these characters to develop that emotional connection. I think that's where the Wonder Woman movie succeeded compared to the other 3, is the fact that Patty Jenkins took her time and gave Diana, a love interest that she lost so that we could understand where she's coming from in the later films. Of course, this was not something that was actually continued in Wonder Woman 1984, but we won't get into that in this video. And I know Zack Snyder wanted to make the Justice League be a 3-part movie. However, the movie itself as it is now should literally be 2 movies. I shouldn't be introduced to Cyborg and the Flash and Aquaman in the big team-up movie. That should have already been established. They should already be established people. The whole thing of the boxes should have been something that was established in an earlier film, and it was basically barely touched upon, but now it's this huge thing that they are able to overcome in one movie to have, Darkseid come later and suddenly have another option. I mean, this was supposed to be like this big, apocalypse ending thing that they were able to solve relatively easily, but Darkseid will be back.
Anti-life is found, Assad, and we will stop at nothing to possess it. Ready the Armada. We will use the old ways.
It's like, I always try to root for DC. I really do. They have some great characters, and I just personally don't think that Zack Snyder is the best person to take the reins of these characters. I have hopes in that what we've seen with Joker and how that played out, and what we've been seeing with the trailer for the Batman, which looks super promising. I think DC is going to try to go back to what it does best, which is being very realistic in its superhero films and gritty by its realism, not gritty due to decolor saturation or bad writing. I give props to Zack Snyder for being allowed through the fans to make a movie that he wanted to make and on his terms. And I know that like every single director, either student all the way up to, you know, your big Hollywood blockbuster directors, wish that they could have that opportunity. And with the way the streaming model is now and releasing films, like maybe this will be something that could happen. And hey, all the more power to him. I just don't think that the way Zack Snyder had handled the DCU really helped it succeed. And I think that's because he just didn't take his time with the material. He has a vision that he's trying to imprint on everything that doesn't always fit with all of these characters. So I'm actually interested in the new DC cinematic universe that is coming, like I said, with the Joker, with the reboot of Suicide Squad, as well as the Batman, and maybe we're going to have more grounded characters, kind of get back to that Christopher Nolan level of realism, because we've had comic book iterations a la, you know, the Tim Burton Batmans and the kind of craziness that was the 90s Batmans, like Batman Forever and stuff like that, which were very cartoony and comic booky, to the Nolan versions, which are much more of a drama and grounded in a bit more reality, to what's going on now where they're more psychological thrillers. They're superhero movies without being superhero movies. And I think that that's really an interesting way to take things and kind of elevating a superhero movie to a different way that is totally different from Marvel. Because Marvel is fantastic at their own thing. And as I said, DC can be fantastic at what they do too, but I just think that Zack Snyder, personally, I don't think was the right person for that vision. But, you know, he did what he wanted to do. He was allowed to do it. And I'm sure that being able to make the movie that he had wanted to make this whole time, barring the tragedy that happened with his family, is really great as a creator, and I can definitely appreciate that fact. But I, for one, am not going to be upset that he's not taking the reins anymore. And I am curious, though, where this leaves the already established DC Universe characters, because in theory we're supposed to have another Superman as well as another Aquaman and I think another Wonder Woman, but I'm not sure if that's going to be completely redone or whatnot. We shall see. So while the Snyder Cut was an improvement over the Justice League version, it still had its problems, and it still really showed what are the inherent problems that are involved in the DCU and what they're trying to do in relation to Marvel. I tried to make that as concise as I could. I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this video. As I said, I am a fan of both. I just don't like the direction that DC has made in regards to its live action films in the last about 10 years. So take that for what you will. If you have thoughts, please leave them down below. I'm very open to having these discussions and hearing people out for different opinions. I hope you enjoyed this video, got something out of it, and yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.